I used to drive for a rideshare app on weekends, especially during night hours, to make some extra money. I was 28 at the time, and my financial situation was not very appreciable. During weekdays, I worked a regular IT job, but the salary wasn't enough to cover everything comfortably, so I spent most weekends driving passengers around the city for some additional income. I had been doing it for almost a year, and by that point there wasn't much that surprised me anymore. Most people think driving at night is dangerous because of drunk passengers, but honestly, those were usually the easiest customers. They got in, mumbled an address, spent the entire ride talking about things that made no sense, and occasionally fell asleep before reaching their destination. The only real problem they caused was when one of them decided to throw up on the seats. The rides that bothered me were the quiet ones, the ones where nothing technically happened. That night, I started my shift a little after 9 o'clock. The city was busy, ride requests kept coming in, and for the first few hours, everything felt completely routine. I picked up groups of friends heading home after a night out, a businessman going to a hotel near the airport, and a college student who spent the entire ride wearing headphones while staring silently out of the window. None of those passengers stood out in any way, and by the time I dropped them off, I had already forgotten most of their faces. Around 2 in the morning, things began slowing down. The roads were noticeably emptier than they had been earlier, traffic had thinned out, and ride requests were becoming less frequent. I had just dropped off a passenger outside a 24-hour convenience store and was stretching myself a bit when my phone vibrated with another request. The passenger's name was Ryan. He had no profile picture and no customer rating attached to his account. That wasn't particularly unusual because new users signed up for the app every day, and I had picked up plenty of first-time customers before. I accepted the request without giving it much thought, but when I looked at the pickup location, I found myself staring at the map for a few extra seconds. The pin was located on a road near the edge of the city. I zoomed in to make sure I wasn't looking at the wrong address, but the location remained the same. There were no restaurants open in that area at that hour, no shopping centers, and no apartment complexes nearby. It was just a long stretch of road surrounded by trees and undeveloped land. The location struck me as unusual because there didn't seem to be any reason for someone to be standing out there at 2 in the morning waiting for a ride. Still, the fare was decent, and at that point I was more interested in making a little extra money than questioning where a passenger happened to be. I started the car and followed the route shown by the GPS. As I drove farther away from the city, the roads became increasingly quiet. Traffic gradually disappeared, the businesses became fewer and farther apart, and even the streetlights started growing less frequent. By the time I turned onto the final road leading to the pickup point, most of the illumination around me was coming from my own headlights. A few minutes later, the GPS announced that I had arrived. I pulled over to the side of the road and looked around, expecting to see someone waiting nearby, but the area appeared completely deserted. There were no parked vehicles, no houses with lights on, and no visible signs of anyone standing along the roadside. For a moment, I wondered if the passenger had entered the wrong pickup location. Then I noticed movement near the trees. A figure was standing several yards away from the road, partially hidden by the darkness. At first, I couldn't make out any details, but I could tell that whoever it was had been facing in the direction of my car the entire time. The figure remained where he was for a few seconds before finally starting to walk toward the road. As he came closer, I got a better look at him. He looked completely ordinary. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, wore a dark hoodie with a pair of jeans, and wasn't carrying anything with him. If I had passed him on a crowded sidewalk earlier that day, I probably wouldn't have remembered him a minute later. What stood out wasn't his appearance. It was the fact that he seemed to have come from the wooded area behind him. There were no houses nearby, no parked vehicles, and no obvious reason for someone to be standing out there at 2 in the morning. He opened the rear passenger door and got into the back seat. "Ryan?" I asked.
Yeah.
His voice was calm and casual. I started the trip and pulled back onto the road. For the first few minutes, neither of us said anything. That wasn't unusual. A lot of passengers preferred silence, especially during late-night rides. I focused on the road while he sat quietly behind me. After a few minutes, he spoke.
Busy night?
"It was earlier," I said. "Things have slowed down now."
That's usually how it goes?
"Pretty much." He nodded.
How long have you been driving tonight?
"Since around 9.
So about 5 hours?
Something like that." He looked out of the window for a few seconds.
You do this full time?
"No, I work in IT during the week."
And then drive on weekends?
"Yeah,
How long have you been doing that?
Almost a year. He nodded again. The conversation stopped for a minute or two. The road ahead was mostly empty, and apart from the sound of the engine, there wasn't much noise inside the car. Eventually, he asked another question.
You drive every weekend?
Most weekends.
You like it? I mean, it would have been quite difficult for me to handle driving work along with a regular IT job.
I shrugged. It's all right. Easy way to make some extra money. And you don't fuss about it as long as money keeps coming.
Fair enough.
A few more minutes passed.
What time do you usually finish?
I thought about it for a second. I don't really have a schedule. Sometimes midnight, sometimes 3 in the morning. Depends on how busy things are.
Must be convenient.
What?
Being able to decide when you stop.
I glanced at him through the mirror. Yeah, I guess.
What if you're about to go home and another request comes in?
I laughed. If the fare looks good enough, I usually take it.
Even if you're tired?
Yeah, might as well. Ryan nodded as though that answer made sense to him. After that, the conversation died down again. He didn't seem unfriendly. In fact, he was probably more polite than most passengers I picked up. He was probably introverted, so he only asked brief work-related questions as a way to start conversations. About 20 minutes later, I reached the destination shown on the app. It was a quiet residential neighborhood with rows of similar-looking houses and only a handful of lights still on. I pulled over near the curb. "We're here," I said. Ryan looked out of the window, opened the door, and stepped onto the sidewalk. Before closing the door, he leaned slightly back toward the car.
Thanks for the ride. See you around.
Then he shut the door and started walking down the street. I ended the trip and glanced at the earnings summary on my phone. A few seconds later, another ride request appeared on the screen. The pickup point was less than a mile away from where I had just dropped Ryan off. I looked at the details of the new request. Just like Ryan's account, this one didn't have a profile picture or a customer rating. The passenger's name was Kevin. I noticed the similarity for a moment, but I didn't think much about it. New accounts appeared on the app all the time, and the pickup point was only a few minutes away. I accepted the ride and followed the GPS. The pickup location turned out to be a bus stop near the entrance of a residential complex. As I pulled over, a man who had been sitting alone on the bench stood up and walked toward the car. He looked slightly older than Ryan, probably somewhere in his early 30s. He wore a dark jacket and carried a small backpack over one shoulder. He opened the rear passenger door and got in. "Kevin?" I asked.
That's me.
I started the trip and pulled back onto the road. The destination was about 15 minutes away. Unlike Ryan, Kevin started talking almost immediately.
Glad you showed up.
He said,
I was starting to think nobody was going to accept the ride.
"There aren't many drivers out this late."
I can believe that.
He laughed.
Most people with any common sense are already asleep.
You're probably right. For the next few minutes, we talked about completely ordinary things. He complained about how expensive apartments had become, told me he was tired of working night shifts, and spent a few minutes talking about a coworker he couldn't stand. The conversation felt normal enough that I barely paid attention to it. After a few minutes of silence, he looked out of the window and casually asked,
So you usually drive alone at night?
I looked at him through the mirror. Yeah.
No one joins you?
I smiled slightly. No, it's just me. He nodded.
Must be peaceful.
Sometimes. He looked back at the road.
Must also be easy to disappear for a few hours without anyone noticing.
I thought the comment was strange for a second. Then he laughed.
I'm just saying, getting your shit together. Night shifts are different.
I forced a small smile. Yeah, they are. He was quite a talkative person, and I wondered how he was so energetic at such odd hours. At one point of our conversation, he mentioned his brother.
He's got 2 kids under the age of 5.
Kevin said.
Every time I visit him, he looks like he hasn't slept in a week.
I laughed. That sounds about right.
You got kids?
No.
Probably a good thing.
Why's that?
Because every parent I know looks exhausted.
I laughed again. He wasn't entirely wrong. A few minutes later, he brought up the subject again.
You married?
No.
Lucky.
I glanced at him through the mirror. Lucky? Kevin nodded.
My divorce took almost a year to sort out.
That bad?
Worse.
I shook my head. Sounds rough.
It was.
The conversation moved on for another few minutes before he spoke again.
So nobody waiting up for you tonight?
The question felt casual enough. No.
My ex used to stay awake until I got home whenever I worked late.
That sounds stressful.
It was.
He laughed.
Now I go home whenever I want and nobody cares.
I smiled. That does sound easier. The rest of the ride passed without anything particularly memorable happening. About 15 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of a large apartment complex. Kevin grabbed his backpack and opened the door.
Appreciate the ride.
He said, "No problem." He stepped out and headed toward one of the buildings. I ended the trip and checked the time. It was getting close to 3. I seriously considered logging off at that point. Then another ride request appeared on my screen. For the 3rd time that night, the account had no profile picture and no customer rating. For a few seconds, I considered ending my shift and heading home. But when I thought about it, nothing unusual had actually happened. Ryan and Kevin had both been normal passengers, and apart from having brand new accounts, there wasn't any real reason to be suspicious. They paid their fares and went away without causing any trouble. The pickup point was only a few minutes away, so I accepted the ride and followed the GPS. The pickup point was located outside another apartment complex. As I pulled up to the curb, I noticed a man standing near the entrance gate. He was already facing the road and began walking toward the car as soon as I stopped. He opened the rear passenger door and got in. "Daniel?" I asked. He gave a brief nod. I started the trip and glanced at the destination. The address was located on the far side of an industrial district outside the city. It was a longer ride than the previous 2, but long rides usually meant better fares, so I didn't think much about it. For the first few minutes, the ride was completely silent. I focused on the road while he sat quietly in the back seat. A few minutes later, I happened to glance into the rearview mirror. He was looking down at his phone. The screen was illuminated for a few seconds before going dark again. About a minute later, it lit up once more. His fingers moved across the screen briefly before he locked it again. I noticed the same thing happen several more times during the ride. He never appeared to be scrolling through social media or watching videos. Each time the screen lit up, he typed something for a few seconds and then immediately locked the device. Apart from that, he didn't do much of anything. The farther we drove, the quieter the roads became. Most of the traffic had disappeared by that point, and many of the businesses we passed were already closed for the night. Every so often, I checked the map and noticed that we were continuing farther away from the parts of the city where I normally spent most of my shifts. I didn't think much about it at the time. The app occasionally sent drivers into unfamiliar areas, especially late at night when there were fewer cars available. The passenger remained silent throughout almost the entire ride. At one point, I asked whether the temperature inside the car was all right. He nodded. A little later, I asked whether he preferred staying on the current route or taking the highway. Current route. Those were the only words he spoke during the entire trip. Roughly 20 minutes later, we arrived at the destination. The area was made up of warehouses, storage facilities, and large industrial buildings separated by mostly empty roads. A few streetlights were still on, but there wasn't much activity anywhere around me. I pulled over near the destination marker. "We're here." The passenger opened the door, stepped out, and closed it behind him. He didn't say anything before walking away. I watched him cross the road and disappear between 2 warehouse buildings before ending the trip. For a few moments, I sat there deciding whether I should finally call it a night. I had already been driving for several hours, and I was much farther from home than I had expected to be. Eventually, I started driving again. A few minutes later, I stopped at a red light. While waiting, I heard a notification sound come from somewhere behind me. At first, I thought it was my own phone. Then I heard it again. I looked into the rearview mirror and noticed a faint glow coming from the back seat. When the light turned green, I pulled into a nearby parking area and stopped the car. The glow came from a phone lying on the floor behind the driver's seat. I picked it up. The screen was still locked. My first thought was that the passenger had forgotten it. Before I could decide what to do with it, another notification appeared. The screen lit up. A message preview showed up on the lock screen.
He's alone.
A second notification appeared almost immediately underneath it.
Continue.
I stared at the screen for several seconds. Then, almost immediately, another ride notification chimed on my phone. In that moment, I was too distracted to even look at it. I couldn't take my eyes off the messages on the abandoned phone. "He's alone. Continue." I read them again, hoping I had misunderstood something. There were no contact names attached to the notifications, no context, and no way to know who had sent them. A dozen explanations ran through my head. Maybe it was a joke between friends. Maybe it had nothing to do with me. Maybe I was connecting things that weren't actually connected. Even so, the timing bothered me. The phone belonged to a passenger who had spent most of the ride typing short messages. Now, only a few minutes after he had left my car, I was looking at messages that seemed to be describing me. For the first time that night, I wasn't sure how to react. Up until then, every strange thing had been easy to explain away on its own. A passenger asking a few questions wasn't unusual. 3 new accounts in a row wasn't impossible. Even the silent guy spending an entire ride on his phone wasn't that strange. But when I put everything together, it became harder to dismiss. I picked up my own phone and finally looked at the new ride request. The pickup point was about 10 minutes away. What caught my attention immediately was the fare estimate. It was unusually high for such a short pickup distance. I checked it twice to make sure I wasn't reading it incorrectly. Part of me wanted to decline the ride, drive home, and forget about the entire night. At the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that the phone and the passengers were connected somehow. The message had raised more questions than it answered, and a part of me wanted to know what was actually going on. The fare gave me another reason to accept. I told myself I was probably overthinking everything. After a few seconds, I pressed accept. I placed the abandoned phone inside the center console and started driving. The route took me even deeper into the industrial district. Most of the warehouses around me were dark, and entire stretches of road appeared completely deserted. The farther I drove, the more isolated the area became. After several minutes, I turned onto a narrow side road and approached the pickup point. The passenger was already waiting. It was a woman. She stood beneath a streetlight near the entrance to a fenced storage facility. Unlike the previous passengers, she had a profile picture attached to her account and a visible customer rating. I pulled over. The woman opened the rear passenger door and got in. She looked to be somewhere in her 30s and carried a small shoulder bag. "Melissa?" I asked.
Yeah.
I started the trip. As soon as the destination appeared on my screen, I noticed something that immediately stood out. The route was heading back toward the city. That was the first ride that didn't take me away from the city. For the first time that night, the roads around me started looking familiar again. The industrial buildings slowly disappeared behind us, replaced by apartment buildings, restaurants, and the occasional car passing by. After spending the last hour driving through empty roads and places I had never been before, seeing normal city traffic almost felt strange. But my mind wasn't focused on the road anymore. It kept going back to that phone sitting inside the center console. The messages, the passenger who had been typing the entire ride, the fact that every strange thing I had noticed separately now seemed connected. I kept telling myself there had to be another explanation. There had to be a normal reason for all of this, because the alternative was something I didn't even want to consider. A few minutes passed before the woman in the backseat spoke.
Where did you get that phone?
The question caught me off guard. What phone?
The one resting in the console.
I glanced toward the center console. The passenger before you left it behind.
You saw it?
I looked back at her through the mirror. Saw what?
The messages.
I hesitated. I saw some notifications, but how did you know about that? She did not answer.
What did they say?
I swallowed. One said, "He's alone." Another said, "Continue." For a few seconds, she didn't say anything. Instead, she stared at the phone. Then she looked back at me.
How many passengers did you pick up before me?
3. She nodded slowly.
Did any of them seem unusual?
I frowned. What do you mean?
Something that seemed off about their behavior.
I thought about it. Not really.
What about their accounts?
I looked at her. What about them?
Did they have profile pictures?
I paused. No.
Ratings?
No. Her expression changed slightly.
All 3?
I nodded. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she asked.
Did they ask about you?
The question made me uncomfortable. What do you mean?
Your work, your schedule, your life.
I kept my eyes on the road. Some of them asked normal questions.
What kind of questions?
I tried to remember. One asked how long I had been driving, when I usually stop.
And the others?
The second one asked if I was married, whether someone was waiting for me at home. The woman looked out of the window. For a few seconds, she didn't say anything. Then she quietly said,
That wasn't normal.
Sweat started forming on my forehead. A small knot formed in my stomach. What do you mean? She looked back at me.
How long have you been driving tonight?
I hesitated. Since around 9.
Anyone know you're still outside?
I didn't answer immediately. Then I said, No. She nodded.
That's what they wanted to know.
The car suddenly felt quieter. I kept my eyes on the road. What exactly are you saying? She looked toward the center console.
That phone belongs to the last passenger, right?
Yeah.
Did you see anything else?
No.
Only the messages?
Yes. She looked down.
Then they made a mistake.
I frowned. Who are you talking about? She didn't answer immediately. For a few seconds, the only sound inside the car was the engine and the tires moving across the road. Then she said,
My brother used to drive for this app.
I looked at her through the mirror.
He disappeared shortly after.
For a few seconds, my brain stopped processing what she had just said. What?
He worked late shifts, same as you.
She looked outside the window.
He thought it was easy money. Drive a few extra hours, accept a few extra rides, and make some additional income.
She paused.
One night, he picked up passengers from new accounts.
My grip tightened around the steering wheel. How many? 3? She nodded. I felt adrenaline starting to flow in my veins.
The first few rides looked completely normal, nothing that would make anyone suspicious.
She looked back at me.
But later, when I went through everything, I realized those questions were never random.
What questions?
The kind your passengers asked you.
The empty roads, the strange pickup locations, the personal questions. Everything suddenly felt heavier.
They wanted to know his routine.
I didn't say anything.
They wanted to know when he worked, when he stopped, whether anyone was waiting for him, and whether anyone would notice if he disappeared for a while.
A cold feeling spread through my chest.
The last thing we found was his car.
Where?
Outside the city, near an industrial area.
My stomach dropped slightly. Melissa looked at me. Her expression changed.
That's where they took you to?
I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She already understood. For a moment, my mind went completely blank. The 3 passengers, the questions, the phone, the messages, it all connected. So what happened to your brother? Her voice became quieter.
We never found him.
I didn't know what to say. The road ahead was empty. Then she continued.
At first, everyone thought there was another explanation. Maybe he left. Maybe something unrelated happened.
She looked down.
But after months of trying to understand it, I noticed a pattern.
What pattern?
The rides.
I stayed silent.
Same type of accounts, same questions, same movement away from the city.
Fear was slowly starting to get the better of me. So you think those passengers tonight?
I think they were checking you.
The words hit harder than I expected. Checking me for what? She looked at me through the mirror.
To see if you were alone.
A few seconds passed in dead silence. Then I noticed headlights behind us. There was a big black SUV, several cars behind me. I ignored it initially. Maybe it was nothing. A minute later, I checked again. It was still there. My stomach tightened. Is that car following us? Melissa immediately looked into the mirror. She didn't answer. Melissa?
They were behind us for quite some time. Don't slow down.
My hands tightened around the wheel. What?
Keep your speed.
I looked at her reflection. Do you know that car?
No.
Then why are you acting like this? She kept looking behind us.
Because I have seen this before.
The traffic light ahead turned red. I stopped. The SUV stopped. The silence inside the car became uncomfortable. Then Melissa spoke.
They aren't following us.
I looked at her. What?
They were, but not anymore.
I felt my stomach drop. Why? Melissa looked forward.
Because they don't need to anymore.
The light turned green. I drove. A minute later, the SUV changed lanes. Then it turned away as I watched it disappear. For a moment, I felt relieved. Maybe it wasn't following us. Melissa didn't answer. She just looked ahead. Eventually, we reached her destination. It was a crowded street with people walking around and shops still open. A normal place which felt safe. I pulled over. Melissa opened the door. Before leaving, she looked back at me.
Go home.
Shouldn't I contact the police if this is that serious? I asked, with a touch of fear in my voice.
Don't be foolish. You don't have evidence of any foul play happening with you. Besides, the longer you stay out on roads, the more dangerous it becomes for you.
I simply nodded. She had a point.
And don't accept any more rides.
I won't. She paused. Then she said,
Delete the app tonight.
I looked at her. Why?
Because if they can find you through it once, they can find you again.
She stepped out. Then she stopped. One last time, she looked back.
Don't try to find out who they are.
Why?
Because they already know who you are.
Then she closed the door. I watched her disappear into the crowd. For a few minutes, I just sat there, trying to understand everything that had happened. Eventually, I started driving. I didn't accept any more rides. I ignored every notification and rushed towards my home. After nearly 40 minutes, I reached my apartment. I parked the car and turned off the engine. I sat there in silence, unable to believe what just happened. For the first time that night, I felt like it was actually over. I could go home and forget all about this. Then my phone vibrated. I looked down to find a ride request showing up on it. I stared at it. The app was still open. I was sure I had closed it. The request disappeared. Then another one appeared, then another. Different names, different accounts, all created recently. All without profile pictures. My hands went cold. Then one final request appeared. I stopped breathing because the pickup location wasn't somewhere across the city. It wasn't a random street. It was my apartment building. And the passenger's name wasn't a stranger. It was mine. For several seconds I couldn't move. Then a message appeared. Not from the app, from the abandoned phone sitting inside my car. The screen lit up. New driver assigned. I stared at those words. Then another message appeared. Selection complete. I looked around the parking lot. Every car was empty. Every window was dark. Then I noticed a car parked across the street. I couldn't see who was inside, but the headlights were on, and after a few seconds, the car started moving toward me. I stayed frozen inside my car. The vehicle slowly crossed the empty road and stopped a few meters away. Then the headlights turned off. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then my phone vibrated again. It was a personal message from an unknown number. Thanks for trusting me. They were right about you. Melissa.